How's everybody doing this morning? It's Craig here again. What you see in front of you is 3 carburetors off of 3 different pieces of equipment and just a weed eater brand weed eater here in the background that's going to be the test bed. This video, I've had several requests here lately from different viewers of my YouTube page about how to adjust carburetors on 2 cycles. Kind of my own negligence when I tune stuff. I don't show exactly how it's done. I just do it. I assume that most people that's doing this kind of stuff, even the hobbyist, had some idea what they're doing. I guess a portion of them are confused as to which jet does what and what they're actually trying to obtain when they're adjusting. Some of them don't understand the term 4-stroke, which really is a bad terminology. It's not really 4-stroking. It's actually running real rich, and it's actually starting to miss because of too much fuel. That's the terminology that 4-stroking is used for. So what I'm going to do is use this as a test bed. I'll go over these 3 carbs. They're all the same. It doesn't matter unless if you get into the barrel type, which I'm not going to show today, but these are the butterfly type carburetors. This just happens to be from a Stratos port right here. It's got 2 butterflies. The top butterfly is for nothing more than just raw air. That's the only thing that flows through this one. This bottom port here where your choke lever is, that's where your air goes through, and it picks up fuel and takes the air fuel charge into the cylinder. What this one does is it's to meter the air going through the cylinder, around the piston, and into the exhaust or the muffler to try to obtain the readings that you need to meet EPA certification. There's all kinds of theories on this. I'm not going to get into it. We'll just leave it go at that. That's what it's used for. And then this in here is yet another type of carburetor. As you can see, this in here has the Purge Bulb, not a primer bulb. None of these are primer bulbs. These are called Purge Bulbs because they're only purging the air out of the fuel system through the carburetor. It's not priming it to start. All it does is purges the air out. This in here has a purge bulb, but it's mounted right on top of the carburetor. Same function. This carburetor here, no purge bulb. This is a carburetor that come off, I believe this is off the Husky 51, where it picks the gas up out of the tank using the diaphragm pump side of the carburetor and the impulse signal off the crankcase, as they all do, runs it through the carburetor back to the tank. So that's why you have to pull some of these saws that don't have purge bulbs. You got to pull them several times to get them started, because you're actually purging the air by cranking it. So let's get started. Carburetor mounts to the engine. I'm going to use this cylinder here as a demonstration. And it's demonstration purposes only. Let me get you zoomed in here a little bit. So the intake side of the cylinder is where the carburetor is going to set. The choke butterfly, which is operated by your choke lever, whether it be blue, black, part of your on-off assembly like steels, is going to close the choke butterfly. Okay? The choke butterfly will always be on the outside of the carburetor. It'll be behind the air box. Okay, now that's important to know, because that is going to tell us which one of these idle screw adjustments is which one. Or not idle screw, but mixture screw adjustments is which one. So the one closest to the outside of the carburetor, closest to the air box, let me get this off here. So here's the choke butterfly right here. So the one closest to the choke butterfly, which will be the front jet, will always be your high speed adjustment. Your high needle, your high rich, however you want to call it. It's the high speed adjustment. This in here happens to be a splined. There are some that just take a regular screwdriver, small blade screwdriver. So we'll turn that one all the way in until it seats out. Now you don't want to crank down on it, just turn it in until it's got a good positive stop. The one behind that, the one that's closest to the back side of the carburetor, the one that's going to be now closest to the cylinder, is your low speed adjustment, or your low speed mixture jet. So we'll go ahead and turn that in also. The reason I'm starting here is because a lot of people don't understand the mixture settings. A good starting point for almost anything, and else if you get into really big CC engines, is 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 turns out on each of your mixture settings. That will get you in the ballpark. May not run the way you want it to. That's where your fine-tune adjustments are going to come in. But that'll get you into the ballpark to where you can start from. So you put your adjusting tool in there, or you use just your regular slotted screwdriver, whatever the application is, and you turn it out 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 turns. So there's a half, there's one. I'm going by the flat of the adjusting tool here, and it's got a little spline emblem right there that I can see. That's how I know that it's one turn, because it's just on one side of the tool. So there's 1 1/4, there's 1 1/2, and I'm going to do the same thing on this one. There's a half, there's one, there's 1 1/4, 1 1/2. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to turn my idle adjustment in a little bit, 3 or 4 turns. And what this is going to do, it's actually going to increase the idle speed. So when I start it, it's more than likely going to tend to run, even though it's probably going to be running bad. So them are beginning points for carburetor adjusting. And it's the same if it's a non-purged carburetor. You basically do the same thing on these. You turn them in all the way, you back them out a 1 1/4 to a 1 1/2. Same thing on this style carburetor where your purge bulb's on the top. Turn them in till they're firmly seated, not cranking down tight, just turn them in until they stop, and you got a nice positive stop. Then you back them out 1 1/4 to 1 1/2. By the way, this is a cylinder off of a Husqvarna 240. And that is what this carburetor is actually off of right here, is this Husqvarna 240. But anyway, now we're going to come to our test bed. Back out here a little bit. Like I said, the air box, the air filter. Now you should always adjust your carburetor final tuning with the air filter in place, because the air filter will affect the amount of air drawn into the cylinder. It'll actually cut down just a little bit of your airflow. So if you adjust it without your filter and then you put your filter in, it's actually going to be running just a little bit rich. You should always adjust a carburetor using a tack. I know everybody doesn't have a tack, and that's where a lot of people will use the 4-stroking method on a 2-cycle. So I'm going to start this, because this has been set. This is actually for sale, but it runs decent. So what I'll do is I'll purge the carburetor of some air. Put the choke down. Maybe it'll run. There we go. And see, I haven't had this running for a while. So this carburetor is going to need tuned because when I last ran this, it was really hot. Now it's cooled down a little bit, and it acts like it's going to be running just a little bit rich. Okay, that just shows that it runs. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from stock, or from beginning rather. And I really wouldn't need to do this on this carburetor. All I'd have to do is just turn the low side in just a little bit and then turn the high side in a little bit, and I could get it tuned in. But I'm taking my spline tool, I'm getting it on the high side here. I'm going to count the turns in. There's one, there's a half. See, that's right out about 2 turns out, just shy of 2 turns out on the high side. And I'm going to do the same thing with the low. There's a half, there's one, 1.5. That's right at 1 3/4 turns out on the low side. This thing will not run now because the jets are all the way in. So this is just like you're starting from dead scratch. Try to show this to you here real fast. I don't know if I can get this. Try to get this here where you can see it. Right here. Right there are the adjustments on this carburetor. Like I said, the one closest to the air box is the high side. The one closest to the engine is the low side. So, it doesn't matter which one you turn out first, because these are just going to be baseline settings. So again, I'm going to find my little drilling here on my tool, which is right there. And I'm going to open this up 1.5 turns. There's a half, there's one, there's 1.5. And I'm going to do the same thing on the low side. Find my little drilling again, there it is. So there's a half, there's one, there's 1.5 there. I'm going to turn the idle in just a little bit with my straight screwdriver. I'm going to go about 2 turns in on it. There's one, there's 2. Now that's a baseline setting that I use for everything that I do. From there, I can get it started. I can get it to where it'll idle good, and then from there I'll go on to the high side. So what I'll do is I'll get it started, and I'll back my idle screw off to where it's starting to slow down, and then if it sounds like it's rich or lean, then I'll start adjusting my low side screw. And then I'll get my low side adjusted to where it's idling where I want it to idle, and then from there I'll go to my high side. So I'll start this, I'll adjust the idle side down, I'll shut it off, I'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll go to the high side. So let's see if it'll start first. May have to open them jets up a little more. Okay. When I had it on an idle and then went to give it fuel to give it some gas, accelerate it, did you hear how it bogged down? That bulb tells me that that low side is not open up enough. So I'm going to take and open that low side up a quarter turn more. So here's the low side, which is closest to the engine, not closest to the air filter. So we're going to turn it 1/4 turn. Now let's try this again and see what we got. Okay, the bulb's gone. Still has a little hesitation getting up on top speed. But that hesitation getting up to top speed is not now, it's not the low idle speed adjustment, it's the high idle not getting enough. But what I want to do is I want to focus strictly on the bottom side right now. So let's start this back up and get this thing idled back down to where it should be idling, and then we'll go on to the top side. Again, this should be done with a tack. That idle's probably just a little bit too high, but it's sitting there idling on its own without having to, hit the throttle or without having to close the choke on the carburetor. So I'm pretty close here. I'm comfortable with the low speed setting. So now what I'm going to do, knowing that it's bogging trying to get up on top, is I'm going to open up the high side a quarter turn. So we'll take our tool, we'll put it into the high side, on the high side jet, which is now closest to the air filter. Remember, this is the choke side. The jet closest to the choke butterfly is your high. The one closest to the cylinder is your low. So now we're actually on this one right here. This is your low, this over here is your high. So now we're on the high jet. I'm going to open that high jet up a quarter turn. There's a quarter turn right there. We're going to start it and see if we've lost our hesitation. Okay. Most of the hesitation's going at this point. I still think that the low side needs to be opened up just a little bit more. So I'm going to open it up about another 1/8 of a turn. So we'll take our tool again, closest to the cylinder for the low. There's about 1/8 of a turn right there. So now let's start it and see what we got. Okay, that seems to be pretty good. That seems to have taken care of the stutter at the bottom, or the boggin. But I still think that the actual idle speed when it's idling is still just a little too high. So I'm going to start it back up and I'm going to idle it down just a little more. Okay, at this point I'm good with the bottom end. I don't have any hesitation when I pull the throttle. It takes right off. I'm good with the idle speed for right now when it's just sitting here idling. So now I'm going to focus on the top side. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring it to top RPM, and I'm going to start turning the high adjustment open until it starts to four-stroke. The terminology that's used is four-stroking, but it's actually starting to miss because it's got too much fuel in it. Once it hits that stutter, then I'm going to back it off until it clears up, and then I'm just going to open it back up about 1/8 of a turn, and then that's where I'm going to leave it set. And that should be really close. I may come back and mess with the low speed just a little bit, and maybe even the idle speed just a little bit, but that'll be after I adjust the high. So remember, when it's on high RPM, you're going to take your tool and you're going to put it on the adjustment that's closest to the air filter. Now remember, after you adjust this, if you do it with the air filter out of it, you're going to have to go back and readjust, because the air filter will change, and I'll show that here in just a little bit. Will change, maybe not a whole lot, but it'll change the settings just a little bit. So now we're going ahead and start it, and I'll do the high side. Okay, did you hear it stutter? And then when I turned it in, it cleared up and started running easy. I opened it back up and it started to stutter. I closed it back up and it cleared back up. Okay, that's where I'm at right now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that high jet and I'm going to open it just about 1/8 of a turn. There's about 1/8 of a turn right there. Now, like I said, when I put the air filter in, more than likely it's going to change that setting, so I'm probably going to have to close it back up. But right now, if this was an assembled unit, other than maybe messing with the low speed setting again and getting the idle speed itself where I want it, this thing should be ready to run. So we'll start it back up. I'll bring it back up on the high side and let you listen to it. Then I'll shut it off. And I'll try to explain what we hear, and then I'll start it back up, then I'll fine-tune the low side. So here we go again. This will be the high. Okay, did you hear how when I first started it, it took off, and then it kind of bogged a little bit, stuttered, that 4-stroking, then it cleared back up on its own, and then it went back into it, and then it cleared back up on its own? That's what you're kind of looking for on a cold engine. As this engine heats up, that kind of hunt will go away, and it'll start running like you want it to. A lot of times, when novices adjust their carburetors, they immediately look for that fastest RPM they can obtain by adjusting the high side jet. When you do that, you're leaning the engine out to a point to where it's actually going to run hot. And when it starts running hot, it's going to start melting itself down. And that's when you run into piston and cylinder failure, scored pistons, seized up, rings getting stuck. So be careful when you're adjusting carburetors, because especially on limited coils that's up in the 13,000 RPM range, because you can actually lean it to a point where you think you've got it, but it's actually the coil causing it to 4-stroke, and then you've got it so lean that you burn stuff up. But this is just basic settings. This is how to do a basic setup to get you into the ballpark. So now we know what it runs like on the top side. I've got 1 pole restarts. I'm really close. Now the only thing I want to do now is down on the bottom side, I'm going to adjust my idle speed, whether it be a little higher or a little lower, I'm not sure yet. And I'm going to take my low jet, which is closest to the cylinder, and I'm going to turn it open until it starts to stutter a little bit, and then I'm going to back it off just till it starts to clear up, and then that'll be my final setting. My tool now, and I'm going to open the low jet up. slowed down. Now I'm going to close it back up. And I'm just going very small amounts at a time. I've turned it about a quarter turn right now. Hear how it's starting to clear itself back up? There's about another quarter turn. So let's see what we got for throttle response. Hear how it bogs? I got it closed too much. So I'm going to open it back up a little bit now, about a quarter turn. Hear how it picked back up? See what kind of throttle response I got now. Okay, I've got good throttle response, but I think it's idling just a little too high. So instead of turning the idle adjustment screw out to slow it down, I'm actually going to turn the low mixture jet open about another eighth of a turn, and that'll actually bring it down a little bit. And then from there, if the idle needs to be set, the idle speed needs to be set, then I'll adjust the idle speed using the idle speed adjustment screw. So going ahead now, and I'll start it back up, and I'll open the low jet up another eighth of a turn and see what we've got. There's about an eighth of a turn. I still think that the idle speed itself is a little high, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Okay, I'm good with this. I got good top speed, I've got good idle, I've got good throttle response. Let's see if we get one pole restart now. I'm not good at that little stall right there. So I'm going to open this up about another eighth of a turn on the low side. See where that gets us. Now I may have to speed the idle back up a little bit now. I think that's good right there. It took care of the stall. An eighth of a turn took care of the stall from idle up off idle to high speed. Still idle's good. I think the idle speed maybe could come up just a hair, but I'm going to leave it like it is, and we'll do the final adjustments with the air filter in it. But I'll do one more restart here. One pole restarts is excellent. I mean, that's what most people look for. That tells you got a good integral seal on everything. There's no air leaks. Good carburation, good fuel metering system. Everything in it is working the way it's supposed to be. So let's give it one more start here and see where we're at. Okay, so now here is the all telltale issue that everybody runs into. They've got their system adjusted. Now they put the air filter back on, and they go to start it and it doesn't run worth a crap. So let's see how much this air filter actually affects this setup. So from here we'll start it again. Running like it's just a little fat on the top side. So I'm going to take and I'm going to turn the high adjustment screw in about 1/8 of a turn. Okay, that's how I adjust carburetors. I also use a tack, but this video is mostly for people. There's a lot of people out there that do not have tacks or way to check RPMs. But the high adjustment, if you're using a tack, you've got specific RPM ranges that you need to operate within. And I believe, without looking, I believe the max RPM on this one's 8,500 RPMs. Without a tack, I have no idea, but I'm close to that. I can tell by the way it's running. But like I said, when you're adjusting the high, you pull it wide, full throttle, wide open, and you open your high jet, which is the one closest to the choke butterfly. You open your high jet up until it starts to what's terminally called 4-stroke, which is nothing more than a miss. It's a stutter, a miss. It'll start chugging, so to say, and that's the 4-stroking you're looking for. Once you find that 4-stroking or that chutter, that choke, stuttering or whatever you want to call it, turn your high jet back in until it smooths out and starts running at an elevated RPM. Once you find that nice smooth RPM, then open your high side jet back up 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn, or until it starts to chug just a smidgen. Once it starts to chug just a smidge, that's where you want to be. Because like I said, you don't want to run these 2 cycles lean because you risk the chance of melting stuff down and burning stuff up. And that's where a lot of people go wrong. They try to get the absolute highest RPM out of these things they can get. And that's when they start running them lean, and then that's when they start having heat issues, and then aluminum starts to melt. That's where you have scored pistons, stuck rings, scored cylinders, and ultimately final meltdown. Okay, I hope somebody was able to understand what I tried to lay out here, what I tried to show. I'm not a very good teacher. Matter of fact, I can't teach worth a crap, but I hope that somebody finds this instructive and beneficial to their cause. If you have any more requests, shoot them, and I'll try to do videos. I can't promise that I'll get anything up, but I'll try to do videos on what I know how to do. Okay, y'all take care. See you in the next video.